So okay, so we're going into a few of the different control methods, and
Yes.
I suppose we sort of minorly touched on physical controls when it comes to like the Sea Org or Bethel. Um, what sort of going back to the more simple faithful people, your everyday Sunday preacher or whatever. I don't know what the equivalent would be for you, but how would you start to initiate a bit of doubt using some of these commonalities? Like if they've let's say somebody at JW has just watched the Scientology Aftermath show and they're loving it, but they're not connecting it with their own faith. What would be something that you go, well, did you notice, something about the similarity that could initiate a bit of doubt? Like, is it something that you think is workable?
I do. I think mild, polite conversation in that direction is always helpful if it's done properly. And I'll stress mild, civil conversation for a reason. The number one mistake that I've run across with family and friends of people who are involved in cults is that they want to debate it, they want to argue it, they want to sometimes antagonistically tell the person or get across to them, somehow wake them up or get them to get that they are part of a cult, and that almost uniformly will not work. So when you have a situation where somebody, is being exposed to cult-like information and they're not connecting the dots to their own group, I think if you can direct the conversation to get them talking and you listening more, get them talking about their group, their involvement in the group. How do they feel about it? How are they doing with it? And once you get past the initial, oh, it's all so wonderful, I love it so much. Once you get past that, the social veneer, you can find out, you have to ask sharp and pointed questions in a subtle manner, like in a very interested way. You got to really be interested. You really want them to talk to you. And if you're going to have a meaningful conversation with somebody, they have to open up. And they're not going to open up if you're attacking them.
Yeah.
So you have to be interested, honestly. And you have to find out what's their experience with the group. What is it about the group or the beliefs or the practices that appeal to them? Because they have all kinds of lines and talking points, I guess you could say, as to how they're supposed to talk to outside members and what they're supposed to say to them. But it's, nobody joins a cult.
No.
That's not what they think they're doing. Nobody does that, knowingly. They think they've become part of this amazing, wonderful group that has a line in to some kind of truth that they could not get without the existence and membership in this group. And they think that it's doing something for them in some fashion. So your job is to find out what is it doing for them. And don't assume anything. You got to ask them and you got to find out. And once you know that, then you know the basis on which they're part of this group at all. And then you can start finding out, well, how successful is this group at helping you to achieve X, Y, Z, whatever it is the person's there to achieve. And have you run into any problems and any difficulties? Is there anything you found at all odd or strange about it or anything? And I would be even hesitant to use those words, but just a real open, meaningful, honest conversation about the subject. And it will often take more than one to get them to open up and feel like you're somebody who can be trusted to talk to about this stuff. But if you get them opening up like that, you'll have a chance at getting to what's underneath the social veneer stuff and where they're really sitting and what they're really troubled by and why. And that is going to give you a lot of clues as to why they became involved in the cult in the first place. And that's the thing you're going to have to take the lever to unhinge, you know what I mean? To get them. Yeah, you're gonna have to snap them out of it. But in order to do that, you gotta be right on the right thing. and it takes work, man. It's it takes some real work to do this.
So
and this is, again, as a friend or family member. I'm not talking about, this isn't the sort of thing that, this isn't what cult professionals do or counselors do. That's a kind of a different thing. If you're going to do an intervention, that's a whole different picture.
Different game. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, whole different thing. Interventions are a whole different ball game. This is just friendly discourse between two people,
Well, that's it. And I've sort of always thought that. I've just never, because I've always thought that I've only really been out of my own cult mindset for 8 months at max. So, I'm still pretty fresh. But having said that, I've spent years, even I knew who you were for years because I followed Scientology, and I loved following the just the fact that it was a cult. I was one of those people that wanted to, I loved the whole thing being exposed, still didn't connect it, still completely blind to it, and I'd left the religion. I wasn't a part of the Jehovah's Witnesses themselves. I just had my own belief still in Jehovah, and I was like that person that whenever somebody would call them a cult, I'm like, no, they're not a cult. You don't know what you're talking about. But then it just, a lot changed very quickly, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, I was very wrong.
Right. Right. Well, and it's like that for all of us. All of us. I mean, it's not like I came out of working for Scientology and the next day, oh, I saw South Park, now it all makes sense. Okay, the last 27 years of my life.
If only it was that easy.
As if. I mean, it's not like that at all for anybody. Some people can't even deal with this sort of thing after they leave a group like this for years, even decades. I mean, I've seen that. People just they don't want to deal with it at all. They just want to kind of pack it up and put it in the closet and hope they never have to look at it again.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that too, especially for some who might have given a lot more to such an organization.
Big time. The level of commitment has a lot to do with how hard the recovery process is going to be, if there even needs to be one, so to speak. I mean, I'm not, I don't assert that every single person who comes out of a destructive cult has mental health issues or something. That's never been the message. But if issues come up, get some help, or find out about it. Get some education at least. Do something do something proactive to get on top of that.
And as you said, it's not that you're definitely going to have mental health issues, but it's that there is a higher likelihood statistically. So it's best to look after yourself. Make sure you're on top of it, as you say.
Exactly. It's not a matter of anyone. The thing you really have to break out of after getting out of a high control group is getting away from doing things other people tell you to do, and that means me too. I'm nobody's guru. So
no, that's
my advice is find out for yourself, get educated. I mean, that's always good advice.
I was going to say it's probably the best advice you could give for almost any situation is do your own research, get well educated on whatever it is, before you step out or before you go into it. It's the same. It's what it drives me nuts when I see former Jehovah's Witnesses, and it will happen in all these sort of different denominations of places, that when they come out of one set of crazy, they just fall immediately into another set. They just jump into another group and they fall for the same traps. And it's just like, why? How did you not see that? And you basically feel like you have to go and they're going to have to go through that whole thing again when they realize, oh, they've fallen for it again. I don't understand how people can fall into it so many times. What is that something that is common? Like, do people come out of Scientology and go, oh, I'm now going to be a Catholic or something,
Oh, sure, that happens. And I don't judge too harshly if they go off and get some religion as far as some belief, but I do know what you're talking about. Cult jumping is a thing that happens. I can't speak to a statistical figure of how often it happens, so I can't say it happens to most people. Hasn't been my experience that it happens to most, but it does happen. And the basic reason for it really does come back to that point of education. Just because you were in a cult doesn't mean when you come out of it that you've done an analytical analysis of why it was a cult and what it did to you. you know, sometimes people, like I said, just want to pack it up, stick it in the closet, and not think about it anymore. And I'll say, by doing that, I think you're making a bit of a mistake. I understand the trauma and stress and PTSD that can be connected with some of these experiences. They are extremely traumatic and stressful for some people, given what happens to people in some of these groups. So I'm also not advocating for, okay, well, you know, just jump right into the counselor's chair. I'm saying, okay, rather than trying to write the whole thing off or go into some kind of a denial about it, perfectly understandable, but not necessarily the best thing to do, find out about what happened to you. There are now, in the age of information, in the internet age, we have ex-member groups all over Facebook, forums, websites. There's a wealth of information about high control authoritarian groups and what they do to you. And just, you know, read some books, read some blogs, look at some articles, maybe connected with your group, or maybe just the more general idea of, you know, cults or high control groups. What is coercive persuasion? What is cognitive dissonance? You know,
Yes,
these are terms I learned these things right away, and I went, oh, that's what was going on. You know, skepticism is always good to learn about. Critical thinking is really good to learn about, because these are things that give you honest, objective tools you can use to evaluate anything. And there's no agenda connected to critical thinking.
No.
There's no guru trying to sell you on how to be a better, you know, critical thinker. So,
and the best thing,
in fact, that's the one thing they don't want you doing.
well, it sort of goes back to the cult mindset. It kind of combats almost all of the forms of control, information, thought, and emotional. Because if you have that education, you're not going to get caught up in that, and then you won't get caught up physically in it either.
Exactly.
That
reminds me also, yeah, the education is super, super important. If there was one thing, if there was one word if I only had one word to say to people coming out of any of these groups, JWs, Mormons, Hare Krishnas, Scientology, Nexium, whatever, because it's not all just religious groups either, by the way.
No, of course.
It would, you know, that word would be education, because everything else springs from that. There was a point I wanted to make earlier, too, when we were touching on information control and we were talking about Scientology, and I was talking about not access to the internet and the higher levels of the Sea organization. I wanted to make the point that lower level Scientologists also, while their whole life is not controlled by Scientology the way a Sea Org member's is, they still get into a frame of mind of the church controlling their life, and that they're okay with that, that they think it's a good thing that happened, and that they're willing participants in that control. And the reason for that, or the way that comes about, is because Hubbard actually directly talks in lectures and books about the subject of control. And one of the little zingers he throws in there is, if you can't yourself be controlled, then you have no hope of ever controlling anybody else.
Oh, that's an interesting way of doing
right?
it.
That's right. Little zingers like that you go, well, I think that sounds reasonable, and you don't think about it too much. And there it is, locked in there, this little idea that it's okay to control me, because if I let you do that, if I give over control to you, then really what I'm doing is taking a step on the road to being able to control everything in my own life. And funny enough, what happens is you give over control, and then they never let it go.
No,
they never give it back to you.
You've lost it. Exactly.
And, and the whole process of Scientology is a gradual, step-by-step indoctrination into them controlling your thoughts, your feelings, your attitudes, your emotions, and your bank account. And that is what that group is all about. And there's a lot of steps involved there, and we could talk about it for a long time, but I wanted to make it clear that it's not just the high-level Sea organization that is under this sort of iron fist and a velvet glove sort of thing. At the Sea Org level, the velvet glove comes off, but it exists at all levels of Scientology.
And that's something that's so very different, for certain, about Scientology compared to the Witnesses, is that there's no expectation to pay anything in the Witnesses. I mean, like, there's a bit of, social pressure, you could say, but nobody's going to be watching you. Nobody's counting how many dollars you put in, and it's that's something that amazes me, that Scientology charges so much for their knowledge, in quotation marks, and that they can actually charge that. Like, it's just astonishing that there are people that will pay, and it's not even, the sad thing is, it's not just the super rich people that pay because they can afford it. It's people that will slave away or spend their last retirement savings on this shit for nothing, and God, that's just devastating, like, it's
tragic. It's absolutely tragic. I mean, in the future, we might write Greek tragedies about people who get involved in these groups, and in Scientology specifically, because Scientology has more control methods in it, I'm told, than any other high control group or destructive cult out there. And I believe it. I mean, knowing what all the things, all the landmines that exist in Scientology, I believe it.
It would be hard to beat, like, because even if you do find one that might have more controls, it wouldn't have as much of a power basis that Scientology has, like, such an influence over people. So there might be one that's, small cult in some random place, but, it'd just be that, a small thing, very secluded, not being very influential on people. Whereas, Scientology is rather large.
It is. That's exactly right.